So the Vikings-Eagles game this coming Sunday. Before that game, I'll be doing a fan meetup along with Sean Kenner and Rick Sosa. We all do Vikings podcasts independently. We'll all be hanging out in Minneapolis together at one of the bars near the stadium. I'm not sure which one it's going to be, but I'll be sure to let you know on Sunday a couple of hours before the game. So if you want to come by and say what up, I'll be happy to meet you guys. And drinks on you. I'm just kidding. Unless you're not. But anyway, we'll go ahead and break down Vikings versus the Eagles. Both teams coming into Week 6 have a 3-2 record. And this is a big game for both teams because on one hand, the Vikings, they are looking to stay in contention in the NFC North along with the Packers, Lions. All of a sudden, the Lions, I underestimated the hell out of them. But they're looking to stay in contention with the Packers, Lions, and Bears in the NFC North division. Meanwhile, over in the NFC East, the Philadelphia Eagles, they are looking to separate themselves from the Dallas Cowboys for sole possession of first place. So this is a huge game for both teams. We'll go ahead and break down the Eagles and how the Vikings match up with them. We'll start with their offense. Their offense, I think, has been a little bit inconsistent, and I don't think any of it falls on Carson Wentz at all. In fact, he's towards the bottom of the league in completion percentage, but I think there's been two main culprits for this. Number one, well, first of all, he still looks strong in the pocket. He still can extend plays with his legs, and worst case scenario, he can scramble for a first down. But I think there's been two main culprits for the Eagles' lack of consistency on the offensive side of the ball. Number one, Deshaun Jackson being out for most of the season has really hurt this offense. You saw in Week 1 against Washington that man still has the juice. His dynamic playmaking is sorely missed on this team. And then also the receivers that Wentz has left to work with, they're not doing him any favors because the Philadelphia Eagles as a team, they lead the NFL in total drop passes. So that's not helping Carson Wentz at all. But when you look at schematically what the Eagles like to do, a lot of misdirection plays, whether it's on handoffs, pitch runs, or even screen passes. So for instance, on screen passes, Wentz, he'll snap the ball, fake it to his running back, turn to one side, do a complete 180 to the other before throwing the screen pass. So discipline is required on the Vikings defense if you're going to contain the Eagles offense. Otherwise, if you're a step off or you have a mishap here and there, then that's inviting big-time games for the Eagles offense. They also like to utilize a lot of intermediate passes, but they also like to use it in conjunction with underneath passes as well, the drag routes and the crossing routes. And their offensive line, I think, has regressed compared to what they've been in years past, but I still think they are still solid relative to the rest of the NFL. Their run game is very strong. Miles Sanders, he brings the flash. Jordan Howard, he brings the boom. And two things with Miles Sanders on top of that. Number one, much like Tariq Cohen, he can run down the field like a receiver and catch the ball downfield. So you got to be careful of that. You cannot have Anthony Barr in man coverage against Miles Sanders. And number two, he's a pretty dynamic kick returner, Miles Sanders is. And then also in regards to the rest of their offense, they have the best tight end tandem in the league. Not that it's very commonplace in the NFL nowadays. I don't know of any other teams that really utilize two tight end sets or really get their tight ends involved on top of that compared to the rest of the league. But either way, the Eagles, they have the best tight end tandem in Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. Their wide receivers, Alshon Jeffrey, he's still nice. Nelson Aguilar is a boom or bust player. Some games he can be lights out, but then other games he can just be clumsy and just hiccups. And I just don't get it. Like against the Detroit Lions, he had an unforced fumble. You don't really see that very often where he caught the ball, made a football move, and just dropped it onto the ground before the Lions recovered it. And then he'll just blatantly drop passes. So I don't know. And Matt Collins, he's not bad as well, but their receiving core is hurting outside of Alshon Jeffrey. So I think on defense, what you need to do is do what you've always done before. Bring consistent pressure from the defensive line. Anthony Barr, if he either needs to be a spy on Carson Wentz or rush the passer to where he can find the open gaps. Because if he gets caught up with an offensive lineman, he gets locked up immediately. Or play zone coverage to where, okay, the only other defensive players are playing zone. are the safeties, because if you're doing zone for the whole defense just because Anthony Barr has to, because he's really suspect in man coverage, then Carson Wentz, they will eat up the zone coverage every single time. So if you're going to have Anthony Barr in zone coverage in the middle or play a spy, have your safeties play zone coverage too, but have your outside corners and even Eric Kendricks play in man coverage. So also, look out for Miles Sanders. He's a dynamic playmaker, and I think that you'll be fine. Also, one thing, when it comes to guarding the tight ends, the concern is you would think, okay, let's bring a safety, one of the safeties, to cover the tight ends, because if they're going to do the 12 formations, you need to be able to guard one of them. Certainly, you don't want to spread out both Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr on those two tight ends. So you would say, naturally, let's bring a safety to guard one of them. My concern with that is if you do that, you leave a single high safety, which it really puts risk of having Xavier Rhodes in single coverage. And you really don't want to do that unless you're going to say, okay, that single high safety that's left over, let's have him shadow and babysit Xavier Rhodes, and we'll leave the rest of the cornerbacks in man coverage, in single coverage. So that's my concern right there. We'll see how it plays out. Moving on to the Eagles defense. Their front seven is stellar, dude. I don't know if Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Nigel Bradham, I don't know if they're on any chunky soup commercials, but they should be. Those are some beastly ass dudes. The problem is, beyond that, their secondary is absolute trash. But before I get into that, let's go back to their front seven. Coming into week 6, the Philadelphia Eagles are the number 1 run-stopping defense. So much like I said against the Chicago Bears, if Dalvin Cook, I'm not expecting him to go off. If Dalvin Cook can get, especially with Garrett Bradbury and Pat Elflein struggling, but if Dalvin Cook can get 75 yards, I think that's a win. But because the secondary is pure garbage, I think this opens up the theme of the game, which is go Gadget Kirk. Okay, there is no excuse. I don't know what's going on with the Eagles secondary and Jim Schwartz, their defensive coordinator, but their secondary, everybody out there, they are consistently out of position. Or if they are in position to make plays, they're consistently giving up penalties, defensive pass interference or defensive holding, illegal contact, things like that. And so the spacing is going to be available for Kirk Cousins. As in, there is no excuse for Kirk Cousins not to go off for 300 yards in the air and 2 touchdowns at least. And I get it. In order to negate the pass rush, you need to be able to be effective in the run, to have Dalvin Cook get at least 75 yards rushing, and you'll take that as a win. Utilize the play action, but then also on for sure passing down, you want to utilize the shotgun so that way Kirk Cousins can survey the field, and being in shotgun buys him more time against the pass rush that the Eagles is going to bring. So with that said, my prediction for this, coming into, or at least in the offseason, before the season started, I predicted that the Vikings would win this game because, and my in-laws, they're all Eagles fans. They don't agree with me with this, and I'm sure Eagles fans, they're not going to agree either, especially when I was out in Philly. I was asking them, I said, hey, what do you think of this? They said, no, what are you talking about? But the NFL is a system league. Doug Peterson and Nick Foles, to me, they were the perfect match for one another. I personally fear the Philadelphia Eagles more with Nick Foles ahead of Carson Wentz. And not to say that Carson Wentz is bad, because he's still a good quarterback. He can be a great quarterback. He's certainly better than Kirk Cousins. But I fear the Eagles more with Nick Foles, just because the chemistry with Doug Peterson and Nick Foles was super, super special. I would have kept Nick Foles ahead of Carson Wentz. And I know a lot of Eagles fans, they're not going to agree with that. But still, with that said, I thought that the Vikings coming into the season were going to beat the Eagles. But I'm very skeptical, man. So I'm going to have to say no, because everything is out there for the Vikings to win. You're at home. The secondary is trash. Everything is out there for the Vikings to win this game, but the Eagles, they are still trying to find their way. I get that, but they're still a respectable team, and they're going to bring the heat. They're going to bring legit competition, and they have a 3-2 record right now, so right now they are a winning team, and I'm not hating on the Vikings. This is just facts. Last year, out of 7 winning teams that you faced last year, You won just one game. And granted, that was against the Philadelphia Eagles, but this is a new season. It's a whole new season right now. You need to be able to beat a legit team. Last week against the Giants, it was expected that you were going to win that game. That's just the little man. Now you're going up against the big boys. How are you going to respond? So Kevin Stefanski don't have any gaffes in play calling, and Mike Zimmer don't have Anthony Barr in man coverage on Miles Sanders. And then Xavier Rhodes, you got to figure out something with this guy. I think you got to trade him. You need to get rid of him, bench him, whatever, because he's the worst cornerback on this team, the worst cornerback on the league. I would like to think that this matchup, though, against Alshon Jeffrey would bode well for Xavier Rhodes, though, perhaps because he's more of a physical receiver. And Xavier Rhodes, he can battle with him, but still, Xavier Rhodes has shown you nothing because Allen Robinson, he's a pretty physical receiver. Devontae Adams, he's a pretty physical receiver too. Yes, he has finesse as well on top of that, and they absolutely lit up Xavier Rhodes. So I don't know. I'm going to say they lose. Everything is there for them to win. It's just when they go up against legit competition, they usually fall apart. But we'll see. I hope they win so you can get to 4-2. Before going up against the Lions, I believe, the week after that. So we'll see. We do this 3 times a week. Mediocre Best Sports Podcast with Realistic Randy. Check me out on Twitter at realistic_Randy, Facebook at Realistic Randy. Again, a reminder, I'll let you know on YouTube. I'll probably do a selfie video or something like that on Sunday, a couple of hours before the game. If you want to come by and say what up, then come on by. I'm looking forward to meeting some of you guys, and we'll see you then.